My cousin sold our family painting as worthless junk. I had to outbid a museum to get the masterpiece back. What started as a heartbreaking betrayal turned into an art world sensation that revealed secrets my family had been hiding for over a century. I'm Sophie Bennett, 38 years old, and an art history professor at a small liberal arts college. The painting in question had hung in my grandmother's living room for as long as I could remember. A portrait of a young woman in a blue dress, standing in a garden with roses climbing the wall behind her. The style was impressionistic, the colors still vibrant despite obvious age. As a child, I'd spent hours studying it, drawn to the subject's enigmatic expression. My grandmother, Catherine Bennett, had always been vague about the painting's origin. "It was your great-great-grandfather's," she'd say. "Been in the family since the 1880s. When I pressed for details, she'd change the subject or claim not to remember. Grandma Catherine passed away in October 2023 at 94. The funeral brought together relatives I hadn't seen in years, including my cousin Brandon, her oldest grandchild. Brandon was 42, working in commercial real estate, and had always been Grandma's favorite despite rarely visiting. At the funeral reception, Brandon cornered me in Grandma's kitchen. "So I'm executing the estate," he announced as if this was news I should be grateful for. "Grandma made you executor? Someone has to handle things properly. You know how scattered the family gets about practical matters." I bristled at the implication that my career in academia made me impractical. "What does that mean for the house and everything in it?" "I'll be liquidating assets, distributing proceeds according to the will. Standard stuff." "What about specific items? The furniture, the books, the paintings?" Brandon waved dismissively. "Most of it's junk. We'll donate what we can, sell anything with value." "Why, is there something you want?" "The portrait in the living room. The woman in the blue dress. That old thing." Brandon laughed. "It's yours. I was going to throw it out anyway. Probably worthless." We agreed I'd pick it up the following week when I returned to help sort through Grandma's belongings. But 2 days later, I received a text from Brandon. "Sorry, already cleared out the house. Donated and sold most things. Moving fast to close estate." Panic hit me immediately. I called him. "Brandon, what about the painting? You said I could have it." "Oh right. Yeah, that's sold in a lot with some other art pieces. Got $200 for the whole batch at an estate sale company. Better than nothing." "You sold it?" "You promised it to me." "Sophie, it was a worthless old painting taking up space. The estate needed to be liquidated. I got you the money instead. Here's your share, $40. I was shaking with anger and grief. That painting meant something to me. It's been in our family for over a century. "Then you should have come and gotten it when I told you to." "I'm busy. The estate's closed. Nothing I can do now." I spent the next week trying to track down the painting. The estate sale company, Morrison Liquidators, had purchased a lot of miscellaneous artwork and frames from Brandon for $200. They'd then sold individual pieces to various buyers at their warehouse sale. When I finally reached the owner, Gerald Morrison, he remembered the portrait. "Beautiful piece actually. Seemed too nice for an estate sale. I sold it to a private buyer for $350. "Can you tell me who?" "Client confidentiality, sorry. But I can tell you they seemed to know what they were looking at. Asked a lot of questions about provenance." This detail sparked something in my art historian brain. Someone had recognized something about the painting that Brandon, in his ignorance, had missed. I spent the next 2 weeks researching late 19th century portraiture, particularly pieces with impressionistic garden settings. I went through my photographs of Grandma's house, finding a few old pictures where the painting was visible in the background. Then I found it. In a 1962 family photo, there was a clear shot of the painting's corner, and visible at the bottom right was a signature I'd never noticed, Renaud 82. Philippe Renaud. French impressionist painter who'd worked primarily between 1875 to 1890. Not a household name like Monet or Renoir, but respected in art history circles. His works occasionally appeared at auction, selling for anywhere from $50,000 to $400,000 depending on the piece. But here's what made my hands shake. Renaud had disappeared in 1883 while visiting America. His remaining works were catalogued and accounted for, but there were references in his letters to several American portraits that had never been located. My great-great-grandfather, Thomas Bennett, had been a wealthy industrialist in Philadelphia during the 1880s. He'd been known as a patron of the arts. The timeline matched perfectly. I immediately contacted Dr. Martin Hayes, a leading expert on Philippe Renaud and curator at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I sent him the photographs of the painting and explained the situation. Dr. Hayes called me within an hour, his voice barely containing excitement. "Sophie, if this is what I think it is, this could be one of the lost American Renauds. The style matches his 1882 work. The garden setting is consistent with descriptions from his letters. But I need to see it in person to authenticate. It's been sold. I'm trying to track it down. You need to find this painting. If it's authentic, it's not just valuable, it's historically significant." Renaud's American period has been a mystery for 140 years. Over the next month, I became obsessed with finding the painting. I hired a private investigator named Lisa Crawford who specialized in tracking stolen and lost art. She was expensive, $350 an hour, but within 2 weeks she'd found it. The buyer from Morrison Liquidators was James Chin, a private art dealer in New York who specialized in discovering undervalued pieces. He'd bought it for $350, had it authenticated by experts, and was now preparing to sell it at a major auction house. Christie's had scheduled the painting for their May 2024 Impressionist and Modern Art sale with an estimated price of $600,000 to $900,000. The auction catalog description read, Philippe Renaud, French, 1851 to 1889. Portrait of a young woman in a garden, 1882, oil on canvas. One of the celebrated lost American portraits referenced in the artist's correspondence. Exceptional provenance from the Bennett family of Philadelphia, in whose collection it has remained since its creation. This rediscovery represents a significant addition to Renaud's documented oeuvre. I stared at the catalog in disbelief. Brandon had sold a painting worth potentially close to $1 million for $200 as part of a junk lot. I immediately contacted Christie's and explained the situation. The representative was sympathetic but firm. The painting was legally purchased from a legitimate estate sale. Mr. Chin has clear title. Unless you can prove the sale was fraudulent or that you have legal claim to the piece, the auction will proceed. I consulted with an attorney, Patricia Morrison, who specialized in art law. She reviewed the situation carefully. Your cousin was the executor, legally authorized to liquidate estate assets. You have an oral agreement that he violated, but oral agreements about estate property are difficult to enforce, especially after the sale has occurred. Your best option is to bid at auction. I'm an art history professor. I don't have $600,000. Then you need to find someone who does. A museum perhaps? Or a private collector who would agree to loan the piece back to you. I reached out to Dr. Hayes at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. He brought the situation to the museum's board, and they agreed to pursue the painting for their collection. As a Philadelphia artist from a Philadelphia family, Renaud's lost portrait belonged in their museum. But there was a complication. The painting's backstory had generated significant media interest. It was featured in Art News, the New York Times art section, and several Art World podcasts. The lost masterpiece discovered in grandmother's living room angle was irresistible to the press. This publicity drove interest from other museums and private collectors. The Philadelphia Museum would have competition. The auction was scheduled for May 15, 2024. I flew to New York with Dr. Hayes and the museum's director, Dr. Claire Richardson. We had approval to bid up to $1.2 million, significantly above Christie's estimate. The auction room was packed with collectors, dealers, and journalists. I spotted representatives from at least 3 other major museums. James Chin, the dealer who discovered the painting, sat in the front row looking satisfied. Brandon had called me the week before, finally understanding what he'd done. Sophie, I had no idea. If I'd known it was worth something, I never would have sold it so cheap. You didn't care enough to ask. You called it worthless junk and sold it without checking. Can we split the proceeds if you win it back? I am the one who technically owned it. You sold it legally. You got your $200. That's all you're entitled to. The painting came up as Lot 47. The auctioneer began. Philippe Renaud, Portrait of a Young Woman in a Garden, 1882. Recently rediscovered after 140 years in a private American collection. We'll start the bidding at $400,000. 3 paddles went up immediately. The price climbed quickly. $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. I could feel my heart pounding as Dr. Hayes bid for the museum. At $850,000, 2 of the competing bidders dropped out. We were competing against one other party, a representative from a wealthy private collector. $900,000, $950,000, $1 million. Dr. Richardson nodded to Dr. Hayes. He raised his paddle. $1.1 million. The other bidder countered. $1.2 million. Dr. Richardson leaned over. That's our limit. We can't go higher without board approval. I felt sick. We were about to lose the painting to a private collector who would lock it away in some climate-controlled vault where no one would ever see it. Then something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is James Chin, the dealer who authenticated the painting. I've been following the bidding. Would you accept a loan to continue? I showed the message to Dr. Hayes and Dr. Richardson. They looked as shocked as I felt. I texted back, why would you help us? Because I learned the painting's family history. It belongs in Philadelphia, not some billionaire's private collection. I'll loan you $500,000 interest-free, repayable when you can. Keep bidding. Dr. Richardson quickly got emergency approval from the board chair. Dr. Hayes raised his paddle. $1.3 million. A long pause. The private collector's representative consulted via phone. Finally they shook their head. Sold. For $1.3 million to paddle number 127, the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The auction room erupted in applause. It was rare for a museum to win against wealthy private collectors, and the story behind this particular piece had captured people's imagination. After the auction, I met James Chin in person. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with an easy smile. "Why did you help us?" I asked. "Because I'm in this business for the art, not just the money. Yes, I made a nice profit. I bought for $350 and the auction house pays me a percentage of the final sale. But some pieces belong in public collections where everyone can enjoy them. This is one of those pieces. I still don't understand why my family had a Renaud portrait and never knew what it was." James pulled out a folder. "I did some research on your great-great-grandfather Thomas Bennett. He commissioned the portrait from Renaud in 1882. The subject is Isabel Bennett, Thomas's daughter and your great-great-aunt. She died of tuberculosis in 1883 at age 19. He showed me letters he'd found in historical archives. Thomas had written to a friend, 'The portrait pains me too much to display prominently. I've moved it to a back bedroom where I need not see it daily, though I cannot bear to part with it entirely.' The painting had been shuffled around the Bennett house for decades, eventually ending up in a guest room, then a hallway, its significance forgotten as generations passed and the family's wealth diminished. By the time it reached my grandmother's living room, it was just the old painting that's been in the family forever. The signature had darkened with age and was barely visible. No one thought to investigate its origins. The Philadelphia Museum of Art held a special exhibition featuring the Renaud portrait in July 2024. I was invited to give a lecture about the painting's history and rediscovery. Standing in front of the portrait, my great-great-aunt Isabel, I told the full story. How it had hung in my grandmother's living room. How my cousin had sold it as junk. How a dealer had recognized its significance. How we'd fought to bring it home to Philadelphia. The exhibition attracted over 50,000 visitors in 3 months. Isabel's portrait became one of the museum's most popular pieces, not just for its artistic merit but for its incredible story. As for the financial aftermath, the museum established a payment plan for James Chen's loan. But something unexpected happened. The exhibition's success led to increased membership and donations. Within a year, the museum had not only repaid James but had generated enough revenue to acquire 2 more significant pieces for their collection. Brandon tried to claim he deserved compensation since he'd technically owned the painting. My attorney shut that down quickly. "You sold it legally for $200. You have no claim to its subsequent value." He threatened to sue, but 3 attorneys told him he'd lose and probably face sanctions for filing a frivolous claim. He eventually dropped it, though we no longer speak. The most meaningful outcome was discovering Isabel's story. Through archives and family records, I learned she'd been a talented amateur artist herself, studying under several notable painters. Renaud had painted her as a fellow artist, which explained the subject's confident, knowing expression that had fascinated me as a child. I wrote a book about the painting's journey, The Portrait in the Living Room, How a Lost Masterpiece Hid in Plain Sight for 140 Years. It became a bestseller in art history circles and led to a documentary deal. But more importantly, the experience taught me about the stories hidden in our family histories, the value of things we dismiss as ordinary, and the importance of curiosity over assumption. Brandon had looked at the painting and seen worthless junk because he didn't care enough to look closer. He was in such a hurry to liquidate and profit that he sold a masterpiece for pocket change. I looked at the same painting and saw beauty, history, and mystery worth investigating. That curiosity saved a significant artwork from obscurity and returned it to public view where it belongs. Today I visit Isabel regularly at the museum. I bring my art history students to study her portrait, teaching them about Renaud's technique and the painting's remarkable journey. Each time I notice new details. The way light plays on her dress, the specific roses blooming behind her, the slight smile that suggests she knew secrets the world had forgotten. The painting my cousin called worthless junk is now valued at over $2 million and counting. But its true value isn't monetary, it's the recovered history, the rediscovered artist, and the young woman whose portrait nearly disappeared into obscurity but now inspires thousands of visitors every year. Thanks for following this incredible journey from grandmother's living room to major auction house to public museum. Sometimes the most valuable things in our lives are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone who cares enough to really look. Until we meet again, folks. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your thoughts.